Not only is this my first screen acting interview, it's also my first interview with a Netflix lead, which actually is wild and very, very exciting. And I really enjoyed having this conversation. It was really, really useful to speak to someone who's achieved so much in her career. So I hope you enjoy. So today I'm very excited to interview Adele James. And I have so many questions for you because the more I've researched you, the more I've realized that you've done so much in your career. That is really impressive.
Oh,
Um, so I'm very excited to talk to you. The first thing I wanted to ask you about is where I saw you first in Casualty. Is that all right?
yeah, of course.
Um, so I feel like doing continuing dramas is quite a unique experience. I was wondering on those kind of shows, how far do you know in advance what's going to happen to your character?
So I knew already from the first audition that what the storyline was going to be because at an audition stage, um, they need to be able to see that you're going to be able to pull off whatever it is that they've got set out, and they will storyline shows months, if not years in advance. So they already know what they want to do with all of their characters. It's just got to feel like a surprise for the audience. So I already knew, for example, that we were doing a story about coercive control and domestic violence and abuse. Um, but when I actually originally auditioned for it, it was only supposed to be a 6-month contract, and then they bumped it up to a year. So that I didn't know. I didn't know I was going to be on
Oh.
it for a year, but I knew the storyline.
So were there some elements though that took you by surprise in certain episodes where your character's interacting in ways you didn't expect or different dialogue to how you thought your character would speak or something like that?
I would say that, I mean, obviously, as you go through, you have different writers. So we shoot in blocks of kind of 2 episodes at a time. And what that means is every 2 episodes, you get a whole new team, new director, new writer, new producer, new everything. And so there would sometimes be some fluctuation in the way that the character was written, but it's a very collaborative process. So if there was ever a line where I just thought, oh, I know what you're trying to say, but I just don't think Tina or I would say it that way, um, we would have that conversation, and 9 times out of 10, you just figure out the best thing to say, right? But I don't think there was any surprises. I didn't necessarily expect it to become quite as violent as it did. I'm glad that it did because I think it was important. But yeah, they really stretched and pushed us because they were enjoying the work that we were doing. Yeah.
How much did they help you with the kind of violence and the kind of intense scenes, making sure everyone felt comfortable then?
Oh, loads, definitely. I mean, it's really important when you're doing anything like that, that you can do it in a safe space. And Charles and I worked very closely and outside of filming to ensure that we were on the same page about things, and um, that we knew that we had each other's back, that nothing was personal, and that we knew the other person wasn't their character. That's really
Yeah.
important on both in both directions. And the production as well, I think, were really supportive. There were lots of conversations in the run up to shooting the more difficult parts of that storyline that again were just in place to make sure that everybody understood what we were trying to achieve, and that it was handled as delicately as possible. And yeah, I felt very well supported.
That's good. And overall, on your experience of Casualty, what do you feel like is the biggest lesson it taught you?
um I I think it's just a total training ground for an actor, with how to work with lots of different directors, lots of different producers, lots of DOPs, lots of different people. It's where I learned what a 10-1 is, which is when you need to go to the toilet. Everyone
How's
goes,
that work?
everyone goes, Adele's going for a 10-1, and that just means everybody now knows I'm going to the toilet. But it's just, I guess, a nicer way of saying go for a wee. So it really taught me in the kind of most intense and yeah, in the most kind of like profound way, how to operate on a big set, and how to operate on lots of different kinds of set, even though we're actually always at the same studio pretty much.
Yeah, I think so, because there's so much, like I've done essay work, and there's so much that you don't know what it means until you're actually on set.
So you're on set, yeah. And I do think it's kind of baptism of fire, isn't it? You just you don't know things until you know them.
Yeah.
Someone
It's
hasn't been
like,
able to tell you, then you've got to learn it somehow,
yeah.
right?
It's like, how do you know when the scene's done? How do you know what you're doing when? Like, you only have to like do it to be able to understand what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, because there's a kind of a routine to it. There's like a system, like an order of doing things that generally speaking you're always going to follow. But until you've been through it, it's just theory, you know?
And moving on to Cleopatra, I'm wondering what the kind of rehearsal process was. Like, did you have much rehearsal for it?
We didn't have a lot of rehearsal. I mean, I would say in television in general, you don't typically have lots and lots of rehearsal. Sometimes you do. It depends on what you're doing, I guess, and how much it really requires rehearsal. I got to Morocco a few days before we started shooting, so we did what we could in that time,
Yeah.
most notably the kind of more intimate scenes. We had conversations and slight rehearsal around that, and like learning to ride a horse really quickly.
You had to learn to ride a horse.
Yeah, yeah, there's two different scenes where I'm riding on horseback. Actually, I think one of them didn't make the cut. But yeah, I had to learn. I've never been on a horse in my life before that. And we did a bit of stage combat because there's that beautiful fighting sequence that
Yeah,
happens.
I really like that scene.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? So we had a little bit of rehearsal, but really a lot of it was just on the fly, which is kind of quite part and parcel for screen, I think.
So, did they not require, like, you know how some people have it on their CV that they do horse riding? Is there sometimes they'll just teach you it if you're right for the
Yeah,
role?
I mean, if they're primarily they're looking for actors, not kind of equestrian specialists. Sometimes they are. It depends on what you're going for. But in those kind of like leading roles, it's maybe a plus if you've already got the experience, but it's not essential. It depends on what budget production had and how much they want the actor, I guess. And obviously, because I'd never been on a horse before, there was a limit to what I would be able to do on
Yeah.
camera. Um, so we just worked within those limits.
They didn't think of getting a stunt double or anything.
Didn't need one. It wasn't doing anything especially dangerous. We were just kind of cantering. We weren't really moving very
Yeah,
quickly. Yeah.
that's so interesting. And there's some scenes as well that I really wanted to ask you about specifically, because I feel like they're like underrated, but I would find them quite hard to approach. You know, when you're like in the desert, for example, and there's no actual dialogue, but you can tell there's a lot of thought behind your eyes and there's a lot going on. So how do you approach that, and how much direction were you given with that?
So Tina's the kind of person who directs through a take. So you would never know because you can't hear any of it, but quite a lot of the time she would be talking to you while you're shooting. I've never worked like that before. It's the first time I'd
Yeah.
ever worked like that, outside of a classroom setting. So there was actually quite a lot of like on the go direction, which also probably was warranted given how quickly we had to shoot. But in terms of having thought process, I'm always thinking as an actor because I'm always thinking as a human being, right? And
Yeah.
I might be thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner, but all you can see is that I'm thinking about something. So it doesn't even necessarily matter what you're thinking about, as long as it's giving you the correct
Yeah.
sensation. If I'm supposed to be in turmoil here, I'll think about something that uh, is a problem for me, and that will give a similar kind of sensation, and then it's just about the level of it. So that's kind of, I guess, what I'm trying to say there is you always need to be thinking. But also if you're immersed in your present, you always will be thinking because you'll be concentrating on being in the moment. And that will always translate on screen.
I think so. I think that's the thing that we have to work on a lot in our acting classes, because it's all about feeling comfortable in the silences and not pushing anything until it actually feels like you're going to speak.
I agree.
That's interesting. What kind of direction were you getting given in?
Um, It really depends on the scene and on what is needed, I suppose. Sometimes there'll be technical notes so you need to move this way a little bit, lift your chin up, drop your shoulders, whatever it is. Sometimes it's just about making sure that you're caught correctly on the camera visually, which is obviously something that you don't want to be thinking about for yourself as much as possible. Although we do always have the technical running in the back of the mind as well. It's a lot of juggling as an actor. But also, performance notes, like, I'm not quite registering what you think there, or let's dial it up, or let's dial it down, or can you hold that moment for me, or let's move on. It maybe track back and let's start that moment again, and just relax and breathe and find your way through it. Really depends on what the scene needs, but she is the kind of director who doesn't cut. If so, you'll do the scene, and if she wants to do it again, you'll just go back to first positions and you'll just do the scene again, but she won't cut because it takes too much time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
gaps usually in between where you're waiting for something next to happen, isn't there?
Yeah, and we just didn't really have the luxury of time to be able to do that.
So did you always stay in character then when you were changing? Always keep that focus? Or did you like
In front of the camera, I would, as much as possible, try and stay focused, but no, I don't really like to immerse myself that deeply that I can't then interact as myself when we're not rolling, because um I'm not Cleopatra. I'm not any of these people. I'm me, and it's a good challenge for me to find my way in and out of the scene, but it's also healthy for me, I think, to be myself on set, and um have relationships with people on set, and let the work exist when it needs to. It also means that I don't get tired as quickly. I think I would be really tired if I had to spend all of my energy all day long
yeah.
immersed in somebody else's thought process, and it's already tiring enough.
Yeah, I think it's a bit dangerous as well because all of the scenes are really emotionally intense. So staying in that headspace all the time isn't healthy.
Yeah, it's not healthy, and I can understand why some people would want to do it. It just doesn't work for me, I don't think.
So I wanted to actually ask you about that, about the emotionally intense scenes, because I think sometimes if you're using certain elements of your life to get in and out of them, it can be harder and more challenging to actually get in and out of them. So how do you approach when you want to have that focus as a character and then like bringing yourself out of it again?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that it's really important never to use anything dangerous and traumatic. And I think, you know, um, that's where training becomes really, really important, because you need technique as an actor to be able to keep yourself safe. You need to be able to know and understand how your instrument works, to know when something is not going to be safe. I don't use things that are like, I've been through a lot of things in my life, but I don't use those things unless they are, way, way, way back in the past, and I've dealt with them and they don't affect me in that way anymore, and I can use them safely. But if not, I don't touch that kind of stuff, because it's just not worth risking my emotional well-being, and my mental well-being. There are lots of ways that I can find my way in and out of roles. On Casualty, I used to sign in at the beginning of the workday and sign out, like in a physical book. I was clocking in and clocking out, and that was one thing that helped me. Music, I find, could be really helpful. Sometimes you do find yourself. I mean, we're just human beings, aren't we? Sometimes you do find yourself getting a bit stuck. In the feeling of something, and so sometimes you have to go from the outside in. So put on a really upbeat song, maybe some Bon Jovi, maybe some Beyonce. Just move your body a bit, and until that starts to seep in. There are lots of I've trained as a method actor, and it's actually, I don't think many people know, but it's an incredibly technical technique. It's not really about like living like a homeless person for 6 months and not talking to anybody in your network. It's not really about that. It's about using your building up your senses, and even like emotional memory is like actually a very safe technique, which I think people misunderstand and misconstrue. But that's allowed me to be more present in what I'm feeling in the moment, and therefore accept it, and therefore be able to find my way through and out of it. Because I think often what happens when we do difficult things and they stick with us is we're pushing against it, we're denying it, or we're frustrated that we can't, that we're even feeling that way, or whatever it might be. And actually acceptance is a really big and important thing for all actors. Yeah, you can't move through something or out of it unless you can accept it for what it is.
I think that's really good advice. And moving on to talking about your podcast, I feel like you're really good at talking about the ups and downs of just general actor life, and I find that really helpful. So I was just wondering if you have any advice about dealing with that ups and downs of it all.
Oh, well, thank you. Firstly, that's really sweet, and I'm glad that it's been of help to you. Um, my advice, I think, is always the same. It's just keep going, just keep going, keep going, keep going, and just remember, as much as you feel that you might be alone in whatever you're feeling or thinking at any given moment, and we all do feel that. I still feel it to this day. Sometimes I'm like, nobody understands. Somebody before you, if not thousands of people before you, if not everybody, has thought and felt those exact same things, maybe about slightly different contexts, but they've gone through that. And they've come out of it the other side. And actually, and I was having this conversation with someone just earlier today, you don't have to be an actor, right? None of us has to be an actor. We choose to be actors. And I think that is one of the most honorable and exciting choices you can make in your life. But if you're going to make that choice, that's how you've got to look at it. I get to be an actor, and that encompasses so many things. It encompasses auditions, it encompasses rejections, it encompasses busy and quiet periods. It encompasses sending so many emails, sometimes into the nothingness and sometimes with loads of exciting responses. But it's a career you're building, right? And so make that choice with the full weight of who you are. Remember that it is a career and not your entire life. Just be proud every day, and call yourself an actor. Don't say I'm trying to be an actor or I'm an aspiring actor. You are an actor. Whether you're on an acting job or not, you're an actor.
You think so?
Yeah, absolutely. I know so. I know so.
Because I always feel like when you bring it up, people are always doubting it and being like, oh, well, what have you done? Or like everyone's got their own preconceptions, but not everyone knows what it actually involves and what it's like.
People don't know, and actually lots of actors don't know until they go through
Yeah.
it, and that's another reason why I really wanted to start a podcast and why I coach actors via In the Room. But the thing I would say to that is, whose life are you living your life for? Who are you living your life for? Is it for other people and for their approval, or is it for yourself? Because I live my life for myself as to the best of my ability. And when I find myself slipping and thinking about other people's expectations and getting caught up in, do I feel embarrassed when people ask me how's it going and I say I'm not working right now? Or do I just accept that that's where I'm at right now and that will change, because everything passes. The moment I was on set in Morocco shooting on horseback, and I was like, this is awesome, but this will also pass. So I need to be as present as I can here and now, accept and love myself here and now, enjoy this part of it as much as I enjoy the quiet periods. That's a moment where I can go and see my family and my friends and really pour into the other parts of my life, which I don't get to do as much when I'm working. So is it embarrassing or is it an opportunity? Is it a blessing? Depends on how you look at it.
That's a good way to look at it. I wanted to ask you as well, what are you working on at the moment with your own acting?
So at the moment, I am auditioning. I am, to be honest, kind of taking a bit of a break from acting, not because I don't love it and want to do more
Yeah.
of it, but just because My life is very full. I'm going on holiday next week and I'm really excited for a
That's
break.
exciting.
The thing about being an actor is you will go through really intense periods, and I've just been through a very, very intense period. It's the first big press run I've ever done for a show, being Queen Cleopatra. Um, it's the first time I've ever had that level of exposure. Casualty was a lot of exposure, but this was something completely in its own lane. And that's really tiring. You know, that's a lot of work on your central nervous system, and as brilliant and wonderful as it was, again, the whole time I was like, I'm going to be in it and I'm going to be in it and I'm going to be in it, but this is going to pass at some point. And when that does pass, I'm going to probably want to rest and heal a little bit, and to be able to give the best of myself to the next opportunity, whatever that's going to be. So exciting doors are opening, but to be honest, at the moment, my focus is on, I'm going on holiday on Wednesday and I'm really excited.
That's so exciting. I think it's good to have that balance in your life as well.
Yeah.
And what's your biggest piece of acting advice, like a technique that you like to use or something that you'd like to advise people with?
That's a good question. The thing that immediately jumps out to me is don't worry about what other people think of your performance. It doesn't matter. What matters, really matters is whether or not you believe what you're saying, where you are, how you feel, are you trusting and allowing the truth to come out? Because if you're not, that's where all of your attention and focus needs to go, and that's where things like technique become invaluable and why training is so important. But yeah, my biggest piece of advice would be, you need to find whatever technique works for you to allow you to find that truth always. And also, you know, for auditions and things like that, don't feel like you have to put technique on things all the time. Sometimes things don't require it, and that's okay. It can feel like a really alienating thing. You're like, I've got to do all this work, but sometimes actually things are very easily accessible for us, especially the more highly you are trained, and the more I suppose control you have over your instrument, and how free that instrument is. But if something feels off, it's because you don't believe what you're doing. So if you're going to put something on it, it's got to be in service of that.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. So do you have a lot of techniques then that you could use if you wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been training in method acting now for about 5-6 years. So I've built up a repertoire of acting techniques, and it's not just kind of Lee Strasberg, it's Stella Adler, uh, it's like a whole bunch of practitioners that kind of have similar ideas but different techniques, different ways of accessing them. Kim Stanley, for example, like there's quite a lot, mostly of American practitioners who have developed these really powerful and very safe techniques if you know how to do them properly. And so I've got a reserve of things that I can work on, and that even sometimes I lead some of my clients through, to help them elevate their auditions. And that actually, it has been a saving grace over the last, it's got me through every single role that I've done. But as I say, some scenes you do, even like some scenes in Casualty, I just walk onto set and just be like, you know what, today I don't need to overload the scene. I can just play the scene. I understand it. It makes sense to me. I feel connected. I don't need to add all this stuff, you know?
I think that's very interesting to hear. Thank you for sharing everything you've shared. My final question is there anything you want to promote, places people can find you, things you want people to be watching you in?
Well, I would love it if people watch Queen Cleopatra, because she's out right now on Netflix, which is so crazy to say. I can't believe it. It's so exciting. It's so crazy. Globally as well. So, you know, yeah, she's very accessible. um, the main place I would signpost people to, I assume your main kind of audience is actors. So the main place I would signpost people to, if they want to find me and if they want some solidarity and maybe some advice, is the In the Room coaching Instagram. That's where I mostly pop up and try and give advice and support people, and that is at ITR Coaching. And you'll be able to find my personal handle there as well if you should want to kind of follow me and find me. But the main people I'm kind of like rooting for and really wanting to help are actors. So if you're an actor in need, or just somebody who wants to kind of, have that solidarity, then yeah, please do find In the Room Coaching, and hopefully it will support you on your journey.
Thank you so much for coming today.
No, thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
Everything that Adele just mentioned will be linked below, so make sure to go check it out. And thank you so much to Adele for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I just had the best time and learnt so much. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And thank you to everyone for watching. Hopefully I'll have loads of really exciting interviews coming up. So make sure to stay tuned. Please subscribe because I'd really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you in the next interview. Thank you. Bye.